Thanks, Rick. Thanks to you all. This is your last class at Swarthmore, and mine too. And I find myself doing one of my least favorite things with some of my most favorite people, lecturing to a huge class instead of puzzling with you in small discussion groups. One puzzle in putting this together was this. Many of the most important things that you've learned at Swarthmore are things that you may not know you learned. A second puzzle is this. These things can't be taught by giving you reading assignments and lectures. So, how am I going to teach this class today? So here's an article that we might have discussed together had I been allowed to assign it before class. This is from the Journal of Nursing Management. It's called The Making of a Nurse Manager. It's by Cathcart, Greenspan, and Quinn. Let me give you a synopsis, then we'll just imagine that you've actually read it. It's about Matt Quinn, a young professional recently promoted to nurse manager at the intensive care unit, the ICU, of cardiac surgery at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. He's headed out the exit door after a long day of exhausting work. He doesn't know that on the next floor, a crisis is brewing in the operating room. The surgeons can't stop the bleeding of a 20-year-old woman because of blood thinner medicine she's been taking. Her kidneys won't clear it because they're not working. They desperately need the new hemodialysis machine that Quinn's intensive care unit has and someone who knows how to operate it. So as Quinn hits the automatic exit door button to get home from work, he hears the charge nurse at the desk behind him say into her phone, "Oh no, well, we don't do that in this unit. Our management stopped us from doing that years ago." Quinn says to himself, "Put your head down, keep heading out the door, you're so close." But he turns back. "There was just something inside me," he said, "that did not feel right leaving for the day." The nurse reassured him, "It's nothing, take off, enjoy the afternoon. We can take care of it from here." It always works out, you know that. Quinn pressed, "What was it that we don't do anymore?" She tells him what the OR wants and explains it's no longer policy to send the machine down and an ICU down from the ICU down for this purpose. Quinn is taken aback and lets her know. She quickly pulls together a group of other nurses in the unit to support her. They say it's unsafe to practice hemodialysis with their new piece of equipment in a new environment. Quinn remembers, "I quickly went to my office. I took a deep breath, then another deep breath. I had no ideas how to approach this situation since it was the first time I was in a predicament like this since I started as manager. There was no manager orientation or rule book on how to handle this specific sort of situation. I instinctively knew that we absolutely needed to respond. I knew what we had to do, and I knew it needed to be done quickly, regardless of any policy that existed." He rapidly imagines alternative scenarios and hits on a plan. He quickly arranges the educator who trained the nurses on the new equipment to join him and an ICU nurse in the operating room. He then pulls aside the two charge nurses and says, "We will send somebody. Relieve a nurse from the current assignments." The charge nurses resist. No nurse, they say, can be spared. Quinn takes their assignment sheets from them and starts speaking to other nurses. He finds one with the right skills who agrees to go. He contacts the OR. "We'll be right down. 10 minutes later, he goes back to get the nurse. She says, "I'm sorry, I don't think I can go anymore." The other nurses had convinced her that it would be an unsafe move to violate protocol. "I couldn't believe my ears," remembers Quinn. "I was a bit panicked and began thinking, how am I going to deal with this? It dawned on me that there was one of the night shift nurses who was particularly skilled with this device who was about to come in. He'd not yet been pressured to refuse. Quinn contacts the nurse and he agrees. 15 minutes later, Quinn, the nurse, the educator, and the machine were all down in the OR. The next morning, the cardiac surgeon calls Quinn's unit to thank the nurses for saving the patient's life. So the next day, the first thing Quinn does when he goes in is to listen to his staff. He then organizes 2 staff meetings every day for a week. He encourages the nurses to talk about why they became nurses. He says, "Once it was brought back to doing what was best for the patient, there was really only one answer everyone had. It was agreed that in a moment of an emergent situation, we need to do what we can for the patient. I was glad to know," he said, "that I was not on an island." Okay, let's now stipulate that you read the article. And while we're at it, let's stipulate that we're in a small class. How might we discuss this article? Most of your teachers here want to encourage learning through the process of discovery. And the process might be as important as what you discovered. For example, if I wanted to encourage us to notice the details of a complex situation, I might ask you to describe the situation Quinn faced. Did you notice that the incident did not come pre-framed as an ethical problem for Quinn? That the situation was messy, ambiguous, fraught with conflicting aims? Send help? Obey rules and avoid punishment? Don't risk operating a new machine in a new environment? I might ask us to wonder about the kinds of capacities that Quinn needed to figure things out. He was caring, obviously, he had the right values, but was this enough? Did you notice that Quinn also needed to know how to care? Not simply to care, but how to care. He needed the skills of good listening, to have the empathy to figure out what the staff were thinking. Quinn needed imagination skills to quickly see the alternatives, and when each one failed, he had to imagine more. I would want us to grapple with the choice-making that Quinn undertook. Quinn was not simply being asked to think about the right thing to do. He actually had to do the right thing. He actually had to act. This was not a textbook case in an ethics class. What character traits did Quinn need to act? For example, how important was courage and why? Maybe we would discuss how you in the class learned the resilience or grit needed to try again at a time when you failed. Matt Quinn was an advanced novice. He was learning the practical wisdom to become an expert nurse manager. This is not the capital W wisdom we might associate with a sage, with Plato's philosopher kings, or with prophets, or even with Yoda. It is what Aristotle called phronesis, practical wisdom, small p, small w. It's knowing the right purpose. Aristotle would say the telos of a practice. And very concretely, it's knowing how to do the right thing in the right way at the right time. Quinn was learning practical wisdom not through books, but through practice, through the experience of trial and error. I also might want us to notice that I framed the discussion so far around Quinn as an individual struggling to do the right thing. But what does Quinn do the next day? He doesn't punish his staff or lay down the law, this will never happen again. Instead, he designs a process to transform the culture in his ICU unit. First, he creates a safe space for the nurses to reflect together instead of a gotcha environment. He then gets them to think about what kinds of nurses they want to be, what kind of unit they want to practice in. He has his staff practice good listening and group noticing. He has them practice imagining, reflection, deliberation. And notice that these are exactly the same things we would be practicing if our class discussion were well designed. You've probably noticed that I've been using the word design a lot. It's an increasingly common term. You hear it used to describe the work of architects, builders, illustrators, clothing designers, webmasters, IT geeks. My focus is on a different kind of designer, one who designs systems that develop the character and judgment of the people so they can practice better. My favorite political philosophers are all aiming to connect their systems designs to human character. I teach Hobbes in my theory classes because he designs political institutions to contain the worst in people. Hobbes looked into the soul of man and saw only disorder, unregulated emotion, an insecure ego that sought gain, glory, and power. That meant that life always risked being, in his words, nasty, brutish, and short. Beneath the thin veneer of civilization was a seething disorder, said Hobbes. Chaos always lurking, waiting to break out into a war of all against all. Order, Hobbes argued, depended on a strong man, a leviathan, that could use fear to get us to obey his laws. Aristotle, the antithesis of Hobbes, is always another staple in my classes. Writing over 1900 years earlier, he understood Hobbes' vision, the potential for human beings to be what Aristotle called barbarians. But human nature held another potential as well. People could become social beings, beings who sought happiness, flourishing through family, friendship, and community. Aristotle saw the possibility that people could learn the habits that enabled this flourishing: courage, patience, a sense of fairness, self-restraint, love. Reason gave men, and alas, Aristotle did mean men, the human capacity to design systems to nurture these virtues. How, he asked, could communities be designed to encourage the right character traits? How could people learn the practical wisdom to choose well, to do good design? It turns out that Quinn himself was in a program designed to develop character and practical wisdom. He and a half dozen other nurse managers were part of a pilot course at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. 8 one-week seminars spread out over 2 years. A seasoned nurse manager and a facilitator designed the program to encourage the learning of reflection and practical wisdom. Quinn and his colleagues wrote stories about their ongoing experiences and discussed them with each other. The course was designed to provide a safe space for them to talk about their struggles and mistakes and to reflect on what had gone wrong, to imagine alternatives. So Quinn was becoming a kind of Aristotelian statesman. In the ICU, he was designing a slow but transformational process of cultural change. His staff had lost their way in knowing what the right thing to do was and how to do it. He helped them get back in touch with that. The new design was so successful that the staff went on to win several prestigious Beacon Awards of the American Association of Critical Care Nurses for Excellence in Practice. Many of you will be called on to design relationships and institutions after you graduate. Friendships, communities, workplaces, organizations. You didn't take courses at Swarthmore on these things, but I'm suspecting that the hidden curriculum here has encouraged you to learn more than you think you've learned. When I was a student at a liberal arts college, I thought my classes were designed to teach me the material and prepare me to be examined and ranked. But as I grew into being a teacher, I noticed that many colleagues were designing classes to encourage other kinds of learning. For example, learning how to talk to each other, or when and how to listen, learning how to imagine and be curious, how to have the courage to talk up in class and to defend an unpopular idea. You learn these things not just from the courses we design. You also learn them from how we teachers interact with you. What questions we ask in class teach you how to ask questions. How we pursue the dialogue with you models reflectiveness. You watch who we call on or who we don't, and you learn about fairness. We teach you when and how to interrupt by when and how we interrupt you. We teach you how to listen by how carefully we listen. If you hear us repeating what you've said to clarify a point, you learn that it's okay to be uncertain if you don't understand something. If you see us admitting that we don't know something, we encourage intellectual honesty. If you see that we admit our mistakes and reflect on them, we encourage you to learn through trial and error too. We teachers are always modeling character and practical wisdom, for better or for worse. And you are always watching us. You also learn these things from classes that take you into the community. For example, the Politics of Punishment course, which meets every week inside the prison in Chester with half Swarthmore students and half inmates. Keith Reeves and his colleagues have carefully designed this experience. Students and prison insiders are reading the same things, but then they're encouraged to get inside each other's hearts and minds. The friction caused by rubbing different lives and perspectives against each other is designed to foster judgment, reflection, and empathy. When the students in Syed Achan's class in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict went to the Middle East, they sat down with people on multiple sides of the conflict. They practiced noticing where the radically different frameworks and understandings came from. They practiced deliberating about policies and imagining alternatives. Then, of course, there are the sports programs at Swarthmore. You learn the athletic skills and prowess to compete and win. But most Swarthmore coaches are also encouraging you to learn how to work together to bring out the best in each other. Your development is the team's development, and the team's excellence depends on the character traits and judgments that are exactly what Aristotle was trying to design for: courage, resilience, good listening. Note the design of the pedagogy here: coaching and practice, then reflection and deliberation, then more coaching and more practice. Think, for example, of the post-game review. It's an exercise in learning through trial and error. What worked? What didn't? How can you do better? How can you continue to work together or improve your work together so that the team does better? We've been noticing how design encourages a certain kind of learning at Swarthmore. But let's also notice how you've been encouraged to practice design. You think about the design work you've done in creating and in running War News Radio, Dare to Soar, Learning for Life. Think about the study groups and review sessions you're constantly designing. You sit down, sometimes late at night, and learn how to listen to each other, to give counsel, to empathically think backwards, and figure out why a fellow student is confused. Think about the work some of you have done as resident assistants in your dorms, RAs. You have to design a system which enables you to mentor and model and coach a group of freshmen. You have to figure out how to encourage them to learn how to listen to each other, solve problems together, and navigate the first year. Or think about the design work done by the writing associates. You're learning how to mentor students to write better papers. You have to design dozens of conferences each term. You have to figure out how to think backward with your mentees to identify a block or a confusion. You have to learn how to notice when the obstacle your mentee faces is not simply a lack of skill, but a lack of confidence. UWAs, that's the Swarthmore short term for a writing association, WAS, unfortunate, but there it is. You WAS have to figure out how to critique your mentees without leaving them feeling helpless and ignorant. You get coached and mentored in how to do this in an incredible training program that Jill Gladstein and her colleagues designed. You also get backup. But then your coaches step back and let you coach. So the design of the program encourages you to become good system designers yourselves. Let me conclude by reflecting for a moment on your upcoming transition to what you call the real world after Swarthmore. Most of you are still novices in system design, like Matt Quinn was. And you're facing a tough world, a world that will put physical distance between you and your friends, a world of finding jobs and paying off debts, a world of institutions that are designed to control your behavior with their rigid, standardized procedures and incentives. Is there space for you to bring out the good in each other? It will be difficult, but yes, just like Matt Quinn created a space to design for wisdom, so will many of you. 3 quick examples. Sustaining your close Swarthmore friendships will soon be a challenge. All the unseen design elements that encourage such friendships at Swarthmore will disappear. Shared activities, shared food, shared dorm life, shared studies, shared hanging out. Facebook and email alone will not substitute. I learned of my first example from a group of 8 Swarthmore women graduates from the class of 2003. They came back to Swarthmore in 2013 to spend a weekend with the Practical Wisdom seminar that Barry Schwartz and I were teaching. Before they graduated, they had already started worrying about what would happen to their close friendship group after they dispersed around the country. They discussed with our seminar the plan they designed. Once a year, they planned a long weekend retreat. They would hang out over cooking and long walks. They also designed a structure to assure good telling and good listening. For example, they scheduled uninterrupted time for each to tell the others what was on their minds and in their hearts, and then to get feedback, reactions, and support. Another example, they set up a mutual check-in system throughout the entire year, by voice, if possible. They also discussed with us the tough decisions they had to make as they got older, like should significant others and children be invited to these sessions or just the intimate group of friends. Here's another example from my research on the drug war and the criminal justice system. Back in the 1980s and 1990s, A harsh system of mandatory minimum sentences for drug possession was codified into law. Prison building boomed. Cells were filled with mostly poor, mostly non-white minorities. Critics came to call this mass incarceration. Recently, there have been successful efforts to begin changing these laws. But much earlier, there were wise and courageous reformers that started designing parallel alternative court systems. Drug courts, veterans courts, mental health courts, juvenile courts. In the drug courts, for example, someone stealing or dealing to support their addiction or their families could be sentenced to support their addiction or their families, could be sentenced to treatment, rehabilitation, community service, job training, and mentoring. Judges teamed up with parole officers, social workers, and even police and prosecutors to build these systems. Instead of just punishing, instead of bringing out the worst in people, they designed a system to encourage these lawbreakers to reflect and to deliberate, to choose paths that would heal their illness, restore their dignity, enable them to work and rejoin a better community. One more example. If you arrived at 8 a.m. at the palliative care service at Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center in New Hampshire, you would see more than 20 professionals meeting to figure out how to care for the chronically ill patients they will see that day. Around a seminar table, you would see doctors, nurses, social workers, chaplains, a massage therapist, residents, medical students. You'd hear an opening poem. Then you'd hear bereavements for patients who recently died. Then a discussion of each patient. Not just are the pain medications working, but also the patient's stories, their fears, their hopes. It's her 9-year-old grandson that's giving her something to live for. Or, what can we do for this patient's spouse who doesn't have enough money to get a taxi to the hospital? If you arrived midweek, you would see the palliative care team engaged in what they call Wisdom Wednesdays. 2 staff present an ongoing case. The whole team joins in to question, reflect, deliberate. What did you expect before you walked into the room? What did you actually find? What did you fail to notice? What are the patient and the families going through? How did you feel when so-and-so said such and such? How did you deal with your frustration, your anger? You would see a team that had designed a safe environment to support each other and learn the good judgment needed to care. I could go on, and as my students will tell you, my classes do tend to go on. But let me conclude. You and I have learned much here at Swarthmore. Things that were not part of my job description and will not appear on any of your transcripts. You and I have begun to learn the character traits and the moral skills to act well and to design systems to bring out the good in each other. For the last 45 years, my flourishing as a teacher has depended on your flourishing as students. That is what has given meaning to my work and to the work of my colleagues. When you leave Swarthmore, you will go forth and design systems to bring out the good in people. Not because someone has charged you to do this. You will do it in part because of your faith, in part because of your commitment and your idealism, but most of all because you want to flourish with others. Thanks for the great education here, and may the wisdom be with you.